You're watching Car Babble, I'm Ewan, and I'm back with another courtesy car review, this time of the BMW 225e Active Tourer and its M Sport spec with xDrive. And that's another way of saying it's a plug-in hybrid love child of an MPV and a hatchback. So as I said, before I put my Hyundai Santa Fe in for its service and I got given a Hyundai i10 in the basic spec, you can check out a link to that at the end of this video. But this time around, my BMW 3 Series went in for a recall and I got given a slightly better car, the BMW 225e Active Tourer. And I didn't have very much time with it, but I had just enough to do a good test drive around the city. Didn't really get to take out an open road. Got to park up quickly, take some pictures, play with the interior, and take some notes on it. So the plan is to make a review about that car from this car. Now, I don't like to talk too much about the looks of cars because looks are subjective and what I think about them is relevant to what you might think about them. So let me know in the comments. For me, it looks like a really lanky hatchback from the outside with a big snout at the front because BMW grills are getting a little bit big for my liking. But I certainly think it's got a bit of charm, particularly with the 18-inch rims, this colour of paint, M Sport styling. It does look quite nice and a little bit sort of nippy looking. So really, it's not an ugly car, but it's not one I'm looking at going, So you do get quite a few different powertrains with this car. You get a diesel, you get two petrols with mild hybrid technology, and then you get two plug-in hybrids, of which this one was the, and I'm looking down as if I'm in it, was the lower powered of the two, but it was certainly no slouch. And for considering we're in the world of electrification, I was kind of glad that they gave me an electrified version to tell you about, because I think that's maybe one of the ones that more people might actually buy, particularly for company car buyers. So for the focus of the video, I'm going to talk mainly about the experience I had with the one I drove. Now I'm going to put some info up on the screen about the other powertrains, but the car I had a 1.5 turbocharged 3-cylinder petrol engine made to an electric motor producing 242 combined brake horsepower, 477 newton meters of torque, and it would do 0 to 60 in 6.5 seconds. That's no slouch. And the best part is it had a 16.3 kilowatt hour battery, which they say on paper will do up to 50 miles of all EV range. In the real world, unless you live in Siberia in really cold climates, you'll get over 40 miles of real world range. I never got to try that, but I'm pretty certain that'll be the case. And that is still quite a bit more than other plug-in hybrids. But the important thing is, what is your daily commute likely to be, and how often are you going to be doing round trips before plugging it back in that are over 40 miles? I would imagine they're probably the vast minority of people, and so I think that size of battery for a plug-in hybrid is probably about the sweet spot. You can get bigger ones, but they're going to add weight to the car as well, and yeah, realistically, are you really going to need much more than that before you're going to be able to plug it in a lot of cases? I mean, if you need that kind of range more, then you maybe want to start thinking about an EV. But when I think back to my Skoda Octavia VRS IV battery, that would barely do 20 miles of EV range. If you can get over 40 miles out of this thing, that is good. So I didn't really get to blast this on a country road to really see how fast it is, but it definitely felt like it had plenty of pull, particularly in the mid-range. The torque felt really nice, and for a really small petrol engine, the motor contributing to that really does make a big difference to the overall horsepower. And yeah, it had loads of torque, and bottom line is, if your car is loaded up with your family and you need to get past a funeral procession, could you do it in that car? Yes, you absolutely could. It really did feel like it had plenty of performance, and so from that point of view, happy as Larry. But certainly it's not the sort of car you're going to be like, guys, I'm taking the long way home so I can go on a country road because I really want to just fling this around some bends. It's just not that kind of car. But if you were to do it, I don't think it would be really unpleasant. I tried to exaggerate throwing it around a few roundabouts and stuff because I didn't get a chance to go on a country road, but ultimately I wasn't like, oh, this is awful, this is all over the place. It was totally competent. There wasn't a huge amount of body roll, but there was a little bit, but it's also got quite a high center of gravity being the style of the body. So yeah, it's not something I would say is going to be fun, but it's definitely no slouch. But if you go for the M Sport, you do get adaptive M Sport suspension standard, and I really wish you bloody got that in my F30. It'd make a real difference. But if you have that, you can have your cake and eat it really, because it's going to help with setting up the car for a stiffer ride in terms of suspension, but also body control as well. And I didn't get a chance to really play about with that because I didn't actually realise at the time I had it. But certainly I think that will make an impact on the ride quality and the body roll. And certainly I found the suspension setting that it was in, which was in comfort, I think, when I had it, was firmish, but not really like all over the place. So on the whole, I think if you go for the M Sport, you've got a pretty versatile car in that regard. The steering though was quite light, which is great around town, and I think that's probably the type of driving this car's mostly designed for, so that's really a plus point. But certainly you can change the settings a bit to stiffen it up, and it will make a little bit of difference. To try it a little bit, and I was like, yeah, a little bit. but if you're on a country road, might be a bit artificial, but it will make a difference and stiffen things up. But it's not a car where you're going, oh my God, this is the most responsive car ever, but it's also not one where you're going to be wondering where the hell the front wheels are. Refinement was all right, but not like amazing. I did think, oh, if you're in EV mode, it felt really quiet, obviously, but when you revved out the petrol engine, you definitely could hear it coming in the cabin. And there was a little bit of tyre noise as well, but nothing really from the wing mirrors that I could note, but I wasn't going that fast. But I did find the gearbox a little bit annoying. So the petrol to electric transition back and forth was really seamless, as they usually are plug-in hybrids these days. But the 7-speed dual clutch gearbox, which is standard in all models, you don't get a manual, was really a bit jerky at low speeds. And I actually read about this somewhere else as well, people saying that. And so yeah, I totally agree. I was going off roundabouts and I was like, ugh, a couple of times, and I just found the whole thing just quite a jerky experience. And it's just a reminder of why I don't really ever buy cars with dual clutch gearboxes, because unless you're buying them as sporty cars where they really come into their own and they're snappy gear changes, when it comes to everyday driving and like around town and stuff, they can be really quite jerky, and I don't like that. Visibility though, I thought was pretty good all round. There's a fairly funny angle to the windscreen, and the front A-pillars is a little bit like that. But other than that, you can see around the car pretty good. You got a frameless interior mirror as well, and you get front and rear parking sensors as standard, and a rear view camera. So you're not going to have any problems parking this thing for sure. Now, if you've been following my channel, you'll know that I get fairly excited about adaptive LED headlights and matrix LED headlight technology. And anything that essentially, whatever you call it, you can drive in full beam and it will split the beams and dip the beams automatically around oncoming traffic, not dazzle them, and you can see ahead really well. Never have to manually dip your beams. I absolutely love that feature. Where I live, it's such a great feature to have in a car. Country road driving at night, amazing. And in the M Sport spec, you get that as standard, matrix LED headlights, and that is a reason alone probably to get that spec, because those are fantastic. They will probably work almost flawlessly, and it will make driving at night so much more relaxing. But the interior is definitely the star of the show for me with this car. It feels really quite big inside, and I think they've got the packaging really well. And it just, like, you go around and you're like, okay, this is not a hatchback. It definitely felt like a much bigger car than that. It looked really modern, techy, futuristic, and everything felt really well built, and I was just like, wowzers. The seats were interesting though. I've been quite critical of BMW seats, particularly the ones in this car, because yeah, my F30s ones are just a little bit lacking support in some areas, and yeah, I've talked about that in a previous video, but I did think the seats felt quite firm in the 2 Series, but it's obviously the top spec, so they're the M Sport seats. So lower specs might be better or worse in some ways, but they had definitely good thigh extensions, good support for under your thighs, better shoulder support than I've seen, good side support, so they'd hug you in pretty well for all that sporty driving you're going to be doing. But generally I just thought, yeah, these are good for short journeys for sure, but long journeys, would they be too firm? Let me know in the comments if you've had this car for a long journey. But you do sit up quite high in this car, and that's good from the point of view of, again, not feeling like a hatchback. It had more of an SUV kind of, I can see quite far ahead vibe. But I did think the driving position, as much as it was pretty square on, like, I like my elbow points to be soft. That's another one of these points that should be soft, and I didn't really feel they were all that soft in the car. You could hold the steering wheel at the same time whilst holding them, putting your elbows on them, so that was good, but I did just think, yeah, they're not that soft. But coming back to what I was saying about the car feeling quite well spec for a courtesy car, it had the comfort pack, which I realised afterwards, because it had electric memory seat for the driver and 4-way lumbar support. No lumbar support still for the passenger. They don't get that even when you buy that pack. But what is absolutely amazing is you don't get lumbar support as standard, even manually, across the range, and I just think BMW are taking the piss a little bit with that one. That is just something that should be standard in a premium car, period. And the fact that you have to pay for that as an option is just ridiculous. Thankfully this car had it, but honestly, like, what are they doing? But you have to control the heat seat from inside the touchscreen. However, you get hot and very hot settings, and wowzers, it was very hot. I actually felt like I'd wet myself, so that was good. And you also had a heated steering wheel in this car as well, and that was really warm too. So they definitely got the quality of the things really well, but yeah, you just have to pay for them. But it pretty much passed the quality checks. I did indicator stocks, they felt good, and everything just felt built to last and solid and good clickiness in a lot of places. Door close was all right. I've had better, but I've had worse, but I didn't really go, oh yeah, that's an amazing thunk. But the steering wheel buttons were a bit plasticky, and that was one area I thought, other BMWs have not felt like that. But something I did think might divide opinion would be the steering wheel thickness. And I love BMW steering wheels. They're so soft and pliable in the hands. I absolutely love them. They're the best in the business in my opinion. But I wonder if they were going a little bit too far with this one, particularly in the 10 to 2 position. And I thought, this is a car that potentially more ladies than anything are going to buy. Don't mean to sound sexist, but I just think this is the kind of car that might appeal to women a bit more. And I thought, yeah, you've got small hands, like trying to get them round the 10 to 2 position or above it. It was just like, oh, it's really thick. And so I do wonder if that might annoy some people. And yeah, in other specs, you might get a different type of steering wheel, but the M Sport spec, it was like, oof, this is really soft and squidgy, but it's thick. So the Cubbies in the front of the 2 Series Active Tourer were in fact really pretty good. The center console was an interesting design and mainly just had this floating console with this massive area underneath, which really looked an awful lot like you could maybe get your golf clubs in there. So that was excellent, but you also had a pretty decent sized glove box. I've seen bigger, but it was big enough. The door bins were not felt lined, so stuff could rattle about, but you had a compartment, you could put a ball in a big area at the back, so they were reasonably good. And then you had 2 cup holders which were not adaptive, so I felt like they cheaped out a little bit there, but they were a decent depth and width. However, obviously if you don't have the right size of bottle or cup, they might rattle about a little bit. So that's not brilliant, but something that was really cool, but also kind of made me think, did they rip that off a Tesla? Is they had 2 pads that you could sit 2 phones on for wireless charging, which is a great solution. But yeah, I was kind of thinking that looks a little bit almost like plagiarism. So the BMW iX gets BMW's latest iDrive system, and they put that into the Active Tourer. So you've got a very futuristic and modern looking system with 2 massive touchscreens, and they're curved facing towards the driver. None of this, oh look, it's the right hand market, we'll subtly make it face away from the driver and hope nobody notices. Porsche. But yeah, I really was like, wow. You know when you go to Costco and it's like the first thing they've got is their newest high-res TVs and you're like, wow, that's high-res. I kind of felt like that with their infotainment. It's so high-res. 10.7 inch infotainment, 10.5 inch cockpit facing you, all really driver centric, absolutely lovely. And if you like touchscreens, it's ace. But that's really what the problem is that if you don't like touchscreens, your only other way of controlling this is through voice control. And no matter how good voice control is, and I've read, because I never had time to play with it in this car, that it's actually quite a good voice control, but they still crap themselves sometimes and get it wrong. And therefore you're going to be forced to use the touchscreen on the move at times. And that is distracting, and I do think just a little bit dangerous at times, no matter how responsive and how big the buttons are. And that system in the 2 Series was very responsive, no lag, really good for swiping about, fantastic system, very intuitively laid out as well. So you can't really say anything bad about it, but it's still a touchscreen to use on the move. And so you really want a rotary controller, and do you get one in the 2 Series? No, it's gone. And that's a real shame, because BMW always got so much respect for the fact that they gave you all the options for how to control it. And we're just talking about a wee disc down here, you know, that you can just scroll about. Why get rid of that? Well, I think we all know why, because it saves money. But I really think that's a shame. It's just a wee disc, and they should have kept that, and it would have been a perfect infotainment. Even the climate controls are buried in a touchscreen. It's like, yeah, guys, that's great. Name me one person that's ever been surveyed about climate controls and said, hey, do you want your climate controls to be in a touchscreen or a nice easy button below? And they've gone, I'd much rather flick a few times, stab away at a touchscreen to get anywhere near my climate controls. Nobody's ever said that, because everybody wants to just flick a switch to turn up the heat, and you can't do that in a car like that. And it's just like, guys, just give us some controls, and they don't do it. The cockpit is good though, and it's definitely a big step forward in terms of like graphics and customization, and it just looks a lot better than older digital cockpits and BMWs. And you get your sat nav in there, really good. But you also get head-up display standard across the range, which is great. But you get that as standard, but not lumbar support. But as always with BMWs, the options lists are pretty large, and that's where a lot of the really good stuff's going to be, like adaptive cruise control and the upgraded sound system, obviously. But keyless entry is also on the options list, and thankfully the car I had it, but I really wish that was a standard feature. But what is standard that I think is so important is that you get those 2 massive infotainment and cockpit displays as standard, and that will make you feel a bit less like you're getting shortchanged because you've got that from the start of the range. But if you're not that into your tunes, I probably wouldn't bother upgrading to the Harman Kardon upgraded sound system, which will no doubt sound great in the 2 Series, just like it does in every other BMW. However, the standard 6-speaker system that was in the car I had sounded fairly decent. So if you're more of a podcasty kind of person, that will probably do the job. So one of the reasons why this car also is no hatchback is because the back seat space is really quite good. and it's so versatile because you can actually slide the back seats in 60/40 configuration back and forth. Therefore, you can prioritize your boot space or your passenger space, and that makes it much more versatile for different circumstances. It's not a very wide car, so the middle passenger for 3 in the back isn't going to have that great a time, but the outer 2 seats, legroom is fantastic, toe room is good, and headroom is exceptional. So a couple of 6-footers will be absolutely fine back there for long journeys. And just generally, it's very comfortable back there. You've got a center armrest, which will come down, give you an armrest, but also 2 cup holders, and they're also adaptive. So why didn't they do that in the front? You've also got door bins that are decent sized, not felt lined. You've got 2 USB-C ports. There's also 2 in the front. And just generally, it felt like it was well cared for a couple of big kids back there. And so overall, really pleased with that. Oh, one other thing as well, it had ISOFIX, not just in there 2 seats, which are easy to get to, but you also had it in the front passenger seat. And that, again, is a really versatile feature to have if one of your kids wants to ride shotgun. So I definitely think they were on it when they were thinking about the practicality. So this car's got quite a lot of competitors, including the Volkswagen Touran and the Mercedes B-Class and the Dacia Jogger and the Mini Countryman maybe, and the Ford S-Max. Quite a few of them out there, but I definitely think that the Mercedes B-Class is probably quite a good benchmark, and that has a slightly bigger boot than in the 2 Series Active Tourer. But given the versatility of the back seats, you're not really going to notice that. In plug-in hybrid mode, it is only 406 litres to the parcel shelf, which is barely bigger than some hatchbacks. But if you go for the petrols, you get a slightly bigger boot, and then if you go for the diesels, it's way bigger, like 470 litres. So that starts to make a bit more sense in that regard. But the fact that you've got that versatility with the back seats makes a big difference. And really, if you're a family that goes on massive long country hauls and needs to fill it to the gunnels, this maybe isn't going to be the car. But for sort of average daily use and putting some stuff in the boot, you're shopping, maybe a couple of suitcases, this car will do that just fine. Now let's briefly talk about pricing, because at the time of filming, it doesn't feel like this is a very cheap car. £34,040 for the base 220i Sport petrol. And if you go for the top spec plug-in hybrid M Sport 230e, 46,680 before you add on any options. Ouchie wawa, that is quite a lot of money. So really, yeah, if you want to have all the toys as well, you're going to be well over 50k, and that is a lot of money. So what do I think about the 2 Series Active Tourer? Well, I think it's going to appeal in different powertrains to different people, possibly. And certainly for company car buyers, the plug-in hybrids are going to make the most sense. And certainly the one I had more than enough poke, so you don't really need the 230e. But the diesel, which I'm not even sure 100% is still actually available to buy now, that's obviously got a much bigger boot, and therefore that could be important if you do a lot of long journeys. But really, the petrols are much cheaper to buy, and they're still going to be reasonably fuel efficient. But I think you need to figure out whether or not the extra cost of the plug-in hybrids really is going to be seen back on your energy bills, and whether or not it's worth doing it for those reasons. But certainly the range you get out of the battery is really encouraging, so that is great. But the toys inside are fantastic. Certainly in the M Sport spec, you're getting quite a lot of good stuff thrown in there, so that's definitely worth bearing in mind. But it's quite a thinking man's or person's car, because really it's versatile inside, and it's quite practical actually, and the tech's great. So it does a lot of things really well in quite a tidy wee package. So those are my thoughts. I'd love to know yours, so please do leave me a comment below. And if you enjoyed the video, please give it a like, and don't forget to subscribe. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next one.